Hello everybody, welcome back to our first unit on cellular respiration. In our previous unit we were going over photosynthesis, which is where autotrophs like plants and algae used energy from the sun in order to store that energy into a sugar molecule called glucose. Well, in respiration it's going to be the opposite. Instead of storing energy in glucose, we're going to release that ATP energy by using oxygen to break down that food molecule glucose. So we're not using energy to make glucose, we're going to release energy from the glucose. Now we're mainly going to be concerned with what's called aerobic respiration. Aerobic. And that is the production of ATP energy with the use of oxygen. So if there's enough oxygen present to produce that ATP, that's called aerobic respiration. And that is going to occur within the organelle called a mitochondrion. Mitochondrion, remember that's the powerhouse of the cell. That's what allows to give your cells their energy. And you're going to need to know some parts of the mitochondrion. First you got to be able to recognize it. It's kind of a bean-shaped organelle that has two membranes. It has an outer membrane out here, and it also has a real curvy inner membrane right there. Now, you're going to need to know what's called the mitochondria matrix. That is just basically like the very middle of the mitochondrion. That's where some reactions occur. And the final reaction is going to occur on what's called the inner membrane. So not the outer membrane, but this curvy inner membrane. That's where the final process of respiration is going to occur. Alright, so now the summary equation for respiration. First I'm going to write the summary equation we had for photosynthesis. If you actually memorize that, great, because it's going to be really easy to remember the equation for respiration. If you haven't been able to memorize the equation for photosynthesis, what have you been doing the last 2 weeks? It's basically been on the board every day, and it's been in all of our Edpuzzle lectures. But here we go. Here's photosynthesis. It was 6 CO2s plus 6 H2Os, 6 waters, gives you glucose, C6H12O6, plus 6 oxygens, or 6 O2s. So that should look familiar. We've been seeing that for over 2 weeks now. So in photosynthesis, these were the reactants and these were the products. So in red, those are like the ingredients. Those are what plants need. And in blue, that's what plants make. Now in respiration, it's going to be very similar but kind of opposite. So the reactants in cellular respiration are first glucose, C6H12O6 glucose plus 6 oxygens. Now hopefully you notice the reactants for respiration are exactly the same as the products in photosynthesis. So this is kind of like just the reverse. Now what do you get from cellular respiration? The products. Well, it's going to look very similar to the reactants in photosynthesis. You're going to get 6 CO2s. That's what we breathe out. Oxygen is what we breathe in. CO2 is what we breathe out. Plus we make 6 H2Os, which is also a reactant in photosynthesis. And we release ATP energy, and we get about 32 ATP molecules for every molecule of glucose. So if you look, the reactants of photosynthesis are very close to the products of respiration, and the products of photosynthesis are very close, or actually exactly, the reactants of respiration. So it's basically the photosynthesis equation just flip-flopped in reverse. Alright, so once again, what is the summary equation for respiration? We're breaking down glucose, which is C6H12O6 plus we're using 6 oxygen molecules to break it down. And what are we producing? Our products are going to be 6 H2Os, 6 water molecules, plus 6 CO2, which we breathe out, plus that glucose releases about roughly 32 ATP energy molecules. So, obvious question, what are the reactants of respiration? Well, of course, they're in red. Glucose, C6H12O6, and we also need 6 molecules of oxygen gas. So those are the reactants. That's what's going to be broken down to produce the products. And what are the products of respiration? Well, what is made is 6 water molecules, or H2O, plus 6 molecules of CO2, which we breathe out, and most importantly, 32 ATP energy molecules are produced from that one glucose molecule. And remember, ATP can be used as an immediate source of energy. So what happens to the CO2 waste product in animals? Well, the reason why we have to breathe in oxygen is because we need to make our ATP energy. And we make CO2 when we do that. Well, what do we do with it? Well, we breathe it out. We breathe it into the air. Basically, exhale it. Now, what do you notice about the equation for respiration compared to photosynthesis? Once again, if you don't remember the photosynthesis formula, if you never learned it, you're not going to notice anything. But those of you that have learned it, the reactants for respiration were the products of photosynthesis. In photosynthesis, plants made glucose and oxygen. And the products of respiration, water and CO2, that is what plants used in order to make the products of glucose and oxygen. So basically they're reversed. The reactants of respiration were the products of photosynthesis, and the products of respiration were the reactants of photosynthesis. So basically you just flip-flop them. You just swap the reactants for the products, and you'll get the respiration formula. Alright, so aerobic respiration, the process of producing ATP energy from the molecule glucose, which was made during photosynthesis, and also oxygen is used to break down that glucose molecule. Now, there's going to be 4 steps of aerobic respiration. Remember, there were only 2 steps of photosynthesis, light-dependent reaction and the light-independent reaction, or the Calvin cycle. Well, a lot of books, even our textbook, only says there's 3, but there's really 4. The first one's called glycolysis. The next one's called pyruvate conversion or pyruvate oxidation. Then you have what's called the Krebs. It's also called the citric acid cycle. Krebs or citric acid cycle. And then finally, the most important one is the electron transport chain, which is going to produce the most ATP energy. And it's a good time for a little brain break, so a riddle. So here we go. David's father has 3 sons. Their names are Snap, Crackle, and Blank. What is the name of the 3rd son? Let's see if you can figure that out. And the answer, of course, is... Since it was David's father, the answer would be, of course, David. Alright, so on to our first step of cellular respiration, which is glycolysis. Glycolysis means sugar breaking. And what that means is So glucose, remember it's C6H12O6. So there's 6 little black circles there because it's a 6-carbon sugar. Well, in glycolysis, it's going to break that glucose molecule into 2 3-carbon sugars called pyruvate. So respiration is beginning to break down that 6-carbon sugar glucose. It's going to break it down and release energy. Now, one thing you need to know is that glycolysis does not need oxygen at all. It's what's called anaerobic, which we'll go over later. It does not need oxygen in order to break glucose, the 6-carbon sugar, down into the 2 3-carbon pyruvate molecules. Now, where in the cell does glycolysis occur? It occurs in what's called the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm. So we have not gotten to the mitochondrion yet. The cytoplasm is just like the fluid within the cell, but it's not within any organelles. So it's not like in the nucleus or ribosomes or mitochondrion or chloroplast. It's just in the fluid within the cells. That's where the glucose molecule is split in half into 2 pyruvates. Now, what are the reactants? Of course, you need a glucose molecule. That's the most important. You need a glucose molecule. You need 2 ATPs because in order to split that glucose molecule in half, it takes energy. It requires 2 ATP energies to split it into the 2 3-carbon pyruvates. Now, what are the products? What do you get from glycolysis? You're going to get 4 ATP. So we use 2 ATP to split that glucose in half, but from doing that, we get 4 ATPs back. We also get 2 electron carriers called NADH. And we also get these 2 3-carbon molecules from when glucose got chopped in half. We get 2 pyruvate. Pyruvate. It's also called pyruvic acid. That's what your textbook calls it. So, how many net ATPs did we make? Well, we spent 2 ATPs to break the glucose in half, and we earned 4 ATPs back. So, since we spent 2 and we made 4, we really only got 2 net ATPs. So far from that original glucose molecule, we've got 2 ATPs. Alright, so now we're going on to pyruvate conversion. It's also called pyruvate oxidation. So in glycolysis, we broke down glucose and we made 2 pyruvate molecules. So we started with a 6-carbon sugar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we broke that down into 2 3-carbon molecules, 2 3-carbon pyruvate molecules. However, pyruvate needs to be broken down further before it can enter what's called the Krebs or citric acid cycle. And it's going to be converted into a molecule called acetyl-CoA. And it's those acetyl-CoA molecules that are going to be able to be used in the Krebs or citric acid cycle. So, where in the cell does pyruvate conversion or pyruvate oxidation occur? It occurs within the mitochondrion, but it's more precise. It's called the mitochondria matrix. And if you remember from that first slide, the mitochondria matrix just basically means the middle of the mitochondria. And remember that mitochondria, that's like the powerhouse of the cell. That's the organelle that gives your cells its energy. Now, what are the reactants that are required? Of course, you're going to need 2 pyruvate. You're going to need 2 of these pyruvate molecules in order to convert them into acetyl-CoA. Now, what are the products? You're going to make 2 CO2s. 2 CO2s are released. you're going to make 2 of the electron carriers NADH. Remember, in photosynthesis, it was NADPH, but now it's just NADH here in respiration. And you're also going to make 2 acetyl-CoAs. So those are your products. Your reactants, 2 pyruvates, go in. What comes out? You get 2 CO2s. You get 2 NADHs, which carry electrons. And you get 2 acetyl-CoAs, which are going to go into the Krebs cycle, the next cycle of respiration. All right, now last slide. Remember, we're just concerned about the steps, where they occur, and what are the products. And the products are going to be over here. The first one is glycolysis. Now remember, glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell. It's just like the fluid within the cell, but it's not within any organelles. It's not in a mitochondria or a chloroplast or anything else. It's just in the fluid. Now, what are the products of glycolysis? You get 2 ATPs. Remember, you really get 4, but since it takes 2 ATPs to break glucose, and you get 4, you really only make 2. You also get 2 of the electron carriers, NADH, and you make 2 of these 3 carbon sugars called pyruvate. So that's glycolysis. You get 2 net ATPs and 2 electron carriers called NADH. Now the second step of respiration, called pyruvate conversion or pyruvate oxidation, occurs in the mitochondria matrix. Remember, that is just like the middle of the mitochondria. Remember, mitochondria, that's the powerhouse of the cell. That's what makes most of the ATP. Now, what are the products of pyruvate conversion? Once again, we get 2 electron carriers called NADH, and this is also the first time where 2 carbon dioxides, or 2 CO2s, are released into the air as a waste product. And more importantly, this is where pyruvate is converted into the molecule, the 2 molecules that will go into the Krebs cycle, called acetyl-CoA. So those are your 3 products of pyruvate conversion. You get 2 NADHs, which carry electrons, 2 CO2s, which are a waste, which we breathe out, and 2 molecules of acetyl-CoA. So pyruvate has been converted into acetyl-CoA. All right, thank you very much for listening. We will have a little quiz here in just a minute. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.